the radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Friday, October 4th. Hope everybody's having a fantastic Friday and looking forward to your weekend. All right, we're gonna, jump in today with another Middle East update. I have a feeling that these are going to be a permanent part of the show. They have been for the last year, pretty much. We'll talk about FEMA and disaster relief. Jobs report out today. Mexico's president already creating conflict. And we'll talk about reading books. People don't like to anymore. So we'll talk about that. Let's see. We've already started with the super chat. Thank you, Hunter, Remo, and Michael Sanders. So we're off to a crazy start on the super chat. I appreciate that. Keep it coming, people. Also, Ryan Ward suggested maybe today should be a good day for $1 Sticker Friday. $1 Sticker Friday. That means anybody who doesn't want to ask a question, just do a dollar sticker. Ryan did $1.49 Canadian, which is about $1 American. So a dollar Sticker Friday. Maybe we'll turn it into tradition, and then one day in the future, we'll call it, I don't know, $10 Sticker Friday or $100 Sticker Friday. We'll just get more ambitious over time. But yeah, $1 Sticker Friday. We're calling it. Ryan led the way. Please consider doing it. There's Andrew with the dollar sticker. Go for it, people. And if we have the same kind of attendance as we had the last few days, $1 from everybody will get us far. Colleen, thank you. Jesper from Norway. I'm coming to Norway soon. Thank you, Justin. Thank you. $1.99. Justin went crazy here. Thanks, Justin. Thank you, guys. So yeah, keep them rolling. All right. So I don't know. Maybe Biden has been inspired by the Israelis. It's hard to believe, but why not? Let's be optimistic and pretend it might be true. Today, the United States and I guess the United Kingdom launched attacks on the Houthis in Yemen. Some of the most significant attacks they've launched over the last year, since the Houthis have been obstructing the shipping lanes out of towards the Suez Canal. 15 different targets were hit. There was at some point a rumor that they were trying to kill the leader of the Houthis. Now, that would really be inspiration for the Biden administration to actually go after a head of the Houthis. I can't believe that. I don't believe they're doing that. That would be way too good of them, but probably not in the playbook. So yeah, the U.S. is hitting the Houthis hard. Not very hard. Let's be serious. I mean, 15 attacks, if you consider the number of planes that the U.S. has in the region, the number of ships, the number of assets, just a number of military capabilities that the U.S. has in the region right now. I mean, they could be pounding them in the hundreds, and they could do it every day, and they could basically shut down the Houthis completely within a couple of weeks. Destroy their capabilities to wage war, and maybe invite the Saudis to invade and destroy them once and for all. But that would be way beyond. That would be going beyond the call of whatever. Let's see. John Parker, thank you. RDF, thank you. Jesper came in with another $3. Thank you, Jesper. So yes, a dollar Friday, dollar Sticker Friday seems to be taking off. So keep it going, guys. This is great. That is the Houthis. My sense is Israel did more damage to Houthis in one short attack than the United States has done in 15 today. But they seem to have increased the intensity over the previous few days. So we'll give them credit for that. And all right, let's see. So that is the Houthis. Let's see. What did I want to cover in terms of Israel? So Israel yesterday. We talked about during the show major attack on a Hezbollah bunker in Beirut. Again, something like 80 bombs in one location, huge crater. It does indeed look like they were going after the new head of Hezbollah, the guy who replaced Nasrallah, Salafuddin, and by all indications, they've got him. It's not clear that he's dead, but at least it seems like he is, and indications are that he is, together with a number of other high-ranking Hezbollah officers, as well as Iranian, Islamic, whatever, Revolutionary Guard people are also among the casualties. So yes, Israel continues to assassinate leaders within Hezbollah. They assassinated yesterday also. They managed to kill the head of communications for the Hezbollah movement. Now, I was wondering, how are there so many people to kill? Didn't the beeper attack take them all out? Well, here's a good example. This guy had a beeper. He had his basically hand blown off. He's without a hand, but he's still running communication for Hezbollah. Although, is he the guy who bought the beepers? He might be the guy who bought the beepers. I mean, communications sounds like a beeper kind of job. So I don't know if I would keep him around after that fiasco. Anyway, he was running the beepers, and in spite of the fact that his hand was gone, he was still running the program, the communication program, and the Israelis came out yesterday because life with only one hand is basically, for Hezbollah leader, not worth living. So Israel made sure that he's not living. So that happened. Yesterday. Another one of Hezbollah's leaders taken out. By the way, yesterday, what is going on here? Sorry, my computer's giving me a little bit of a. Yeah, Apple needs to come out with the new M4s. Really needs to come out with the new M4s. All right, yes, Israel is slowly decimating Hezbollah senior ranks. They are also doing what they can to kill junior participants. So by some estimates, the Israeli limited incursion into South Lebanon has already killed over 250 Hezbollah fighters. The infrastructure that they have built along the Israeli border is slowly being dismantled. Well, dismantled sound too civilized, blown up, incinerated, destroyed. Yesterday, 2 Israeli soldiers were killed in the Golan Heights from a drone attack from the Iraqi Shiite militias. So they launched a drone attack against Israel, and 2 Israeli soldiers were killed. I have a feeling that the Iraqi militias, who to date are kind of only used to kind of having to deal with with American reprisals or American responses to their initiations of force, maybe are now going to feel what it's like for somebody real, like the Israelis, to actually attack them. So expect, if you're in Iraq, if you work for one of the Iraqi militias, expect a significant attack. You remember yesterday, Biden basically communicated to the world and publicly, and I guess to Israel publicly and privately, that they should not attack the nuclear facilities. They shouldn't attack the nuclear facilities. I've got some color on that. Maybe one reason why he said that. We'll talk about that in a minute. But today he said, yeah, they really shouldn't attack the oil fields either. They shouldn't attack the oil facilities either. In other words, Biden, who claims to be in constant communication with the Israelis about the strategy moving forward, hopefully, the Israelis are going to ignore the Biden administration completely when it comes to this, is basically telling Israel, you shouldn't bomb nuclear facilities, you shouldn't bomb the oil fields. A few bombs in the desert, just symbolic, something symbolic, makes a lot of sense. That's what you should do. That will really reestablish deterrence and make it possible for us to maybe negotiate a deal with Iran before the elections. I don't know what these idiots are thinking, but I got angry yesterday about the appeasement of the Biden administration, how awful it is. Anyway, two relevant stories about not attacking the nuclear facilities. One, you hear a lot about this idea that Iran could, get enough uranium within a couple of weeks to build a bomb. And that is probably true. That is, they're probably just a few weeks away, once they make the decision, from producing the uranium necessary for a bomb. But to actually go from that and to actually build a functioning bomb, experts estimate, and again, I don't know how good these experts are, and I don't know how knowledgeable they are, but it seems like experts are estimating that something like that would take about a year of hard work to figure out how to actually put that uranium and create a bomb. Now, if the Russians help or the North Koreans help, maybe they could do it faster. But I guess the estimate now is we have about a year to stop the Iranians from building a bomb, and the Iranians have about a year to build a bomb. So that's interesting. So it's not a few weeks, maybe it's a year. But the other interesting story comes out of Israel, where former Prime Minister Ehud Barak has been Prime Minister, he's been Secretary of Defense, he's been military chief of staff. He's been pretty much everything, militarily head of special forces and so on. And when he was defense secretary about 15 years ago under Ehud Olmert 20 years ago and Bibi Netanyahu about 15 years ago, he was probably the biggest voice, the most articulate voice, the most passionate voice. Whoops. We got are we freezing? Is video okay? I'm curious. Video okay over there? Is it just my computer or somebody on the chat? Could you let me know? Yeah, I can't tell. Is my chat out? Is that why I can't see anybody on the chat telling me if video is out or not? What is going on with my computer? It's fine, I'm told. All right. It's fine. All right, hopefully it is fine. So Ehud Barak, who was an adamant supporter of attacking the Iranian nuclear facilities 15 years ago, who lobbied for this within the Israeli government and outside of it, by the way, again, it was Netanyahu who blocked this, and it was the Bush administration and then Obama administration who both blocked it. But Ehud Barak was one of the advocates for attacking the nuclear facility. Anyway, Barak is now coming out and saying it's too late, which is really interesting. He's basically saying, whatever damage you do to the nuclear facilities now, it's too little, too late. You might slow down the progress. You will not stop it. That is that the Iranians are within reach of a nuclear bomb within a year, and nothing Israel does militarily can really stop it. Now, I don't know if this is true or not. I'm not an expert on these things, but Yaron Brook has no incentive to say this. Again, he is an Israeli. He's somebody who knows the Iranian nuclear program really, really, really well, has access to classified information, unlike me. And he's saying, you probably can't take it out, Israel. Maybe the United States could. He's not saying that, but maybe they could. Israel probably can't. It's just too late. Now, let's assume that's true. And it might be true. I just don't know. What should Israel do if that is true? Well, then Israel has only one path to proceed. Because, look, the one thing Israel cannot allow, and given that the United States won't do anything, and it's clear in my view that neither Trump nor Biden or nor Kamala will do anything, then the one thing Israel can actually do, if it cannot get to the nuclear facilities themselves, it cannot retard the nuclear program itself. And again, I'm not saying that's true. I'm not convinced it's true at all, but it's certainly a possibility. Then the only alternative is regime change in Iran. And this is almost as impossible as destroying the nuclear program. How do you achieve this? Well, I mean, in my view, you achieve it by doing what has been done to Hezbollah. It's by systematically taking out the leadership of the Iranian state, assassinating Khamenei, assassinating the Council of the Guardians or whatever the hell they call themselves. Now, this again might be impossible, but weakening the Iranian state as much as possible, taking out as much of their facilities that make it possible for them to retaliate and send missiles into Israel, destroying as much of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard as possible, and at the same time communicating to the Iranian opposition full support for any attempt that they make in trying to overthrow the Iranian regime. It's the only way. If you can't hit the nuclear facilities directly, if you can't stop them from developing nuclear weapons, then what you need to do is take out the people that would use that nuclear weapons on Israel, and basically declare an ongoing war with Iran in which you will keep taking out. Now, I'm assuming also that you've taken out their oil fields, you've taken out their economy, you've destroyed their power plants, you basically crippled them in every way possible. You created an economic disaster in Iran, thus spreading among the Iranian population the hate that so many of them already have towards the mullahs, and thus increasing the probability that a regime change will happen, encouraged by the Iranian people themselves. But if Ehud Barak is right, and it's too late, now he says, we'll probably do something symbolic, which seems stupid. If it's true that the nuclear power plant, the nuclear plans of Iran cannot be reversed at this point militarily or covertly, then Israel must then basically destroy the people. The people, meaning the leadership, the Iranian leadership, who have threatened to use these nuclear assets against Israel. Jewish says, and maybe at the end of it, play John Galt's speech on the radio. I mean, you could do that because Israel has shown the ability to take over people's cell phones. I mean, imagine John Galt today wouldn't play it on the radio. He would basically take over everybody's cell phone and leave them the speech embedded in their cell phone, and they would listen to it on their cell phone. I mean, Israel has done that in encouraging Lebanese to evacuate villages. They basically take over their cell phones and send them a message telling them to do so. Israel can't do it in Iran to the extent that it does at Hezbollah, but it's also the case that the Iranian leadership is not as dug in as Hezbollah is. They're not as paranoid as Hezbollah is. And the Iranian economy can be crippled in ways that are irrelevant in terms of Hezbollah, because Hezbollah doesn't care about the economy. And the Lebanese economy is so terrible, it's hard to make it worse. Whereas in Iran, they do care. And in Iran, the pressure from a collapsing economy, could lead to a real revolution in Iran. So Israel can do a lot. For example, the supreme leader of Iran yesterday came out into the public and gave a speech. What an opportunity. He doesn't come out into the public very often. What an opportunity. All right, so that is what I would say cripple, devastate the Iranian economy, and then go after the leadership. I mean, while you're doing what you can to cripple the Iranian military, can Israel do that? It could do a lot of damage. Remember, Israel has not launched any of its arsenal of ballistic missiles. It is not really invested that heavily in ballistic missiles. It doesn't really need ballistic missiles because it has such air dominance. But Israel has a lot of capabilities in terms of dealing with Iran, even given the distance. All right, one last story just to get you even more pissed off at the Biden administration. So Reuters today has published a report basically disclosing a bunch of the emails that the Biden administration, officials within the Biden administrations were exchanging in the aftermath of October 7th and in the lead up to the Israeli ground incursion into Gaza. And it really is pathetic. I mean, the entire focus of these emails is on the humanitarian crisis that's going to occur in Gaza and the poor Gazans and what's going to happen and starvation and humanitarian crisis, humanitarian disaster, humanitarian this, humanitarian that. Constant flow of this. And the inability of the Biden administration to put enough pressure on Bibi. But there's also evidence that the delay in Israel's ground attack on Gaza, which I think was a huge mistake, partially emanated from the Biden administration's attempts to prepare the ground and fund humanitarian organizations and humanitarian missions and slow the Israeli progress down and do whatever they could to stop the invasion from happening or the invasion from being as forceful as it should have and could have been. It is really astounding, just the amount and just the orientation of all these emails around the humanitarian aid. And of course, all of them predict this massive humanitarian catastrophe. And if you remember just a few months ago, the story after story after story about imminent starvation in Gaza, and there was the Gazans were starving to death, and children were emaciated, and all this stuff, and none of it is real. None of it actually happened. I think part of the problems in Gaza is that people are well fed, and that massive amounts of humanitarian aid have gotten into there, and the civilian population is not fully, immersed in the pain and suffering that is involved in a war. But again, the State Department, but even the Pentagon, people at the Pentagon, according to this report, upset, worried, and focused almost entirely on, who's going to be evacuated and where they're going to go, and will they have tents, and how can Israel do this, and have they given them enough warning, and what is Israel bombing, and how many civilians will die, and where will they get the food, and on and on and on and on and on. That's the obsession. And the point is this, that if that is your focus, if that is what you do, is that what's interesting to you post October 7th, then you can't, then the evil will win all the time, running away. Because, the reality is, evil doesn't care about any of these things. Hamas and Hezbollah don't care about any of these things. Altruism will cripple you, will kill you, will make it impossible for you to win. And there's no question that these kind of concerns, these obsessive concerns, held both by the Americans, but also by the Israelis themselves, are what have made the war in Gaza last as long as it has, what have made it so that the hostages have not yet been released, have not yet been freed. And it's what made Israel now the kind of the pariah of the world. And likely to be prosecuted in The Hague for all kinds of crimes, because Israel buys into this kind of altruistic way of fighting wars and buys into the legitimacy and authority of the international courts and the legitimacy of authority of altruism to set the terms of warfare, the terms of victory, the terms of success. Israel should have said after September 7th, whatever humanitarian crisis happens, it's on Hamas. Whatever civilians die in what we're going to do next, it's on Hamas. What we want to do is we want to destroy Hamas as an entity and bring peace to Gaza. If you support us in this, you can leave your homes, go to the coast, build a tent, and spend the next few months there as we clear out. If you stay, we are not responsible for your safety. And Israel should have just eviscerated Gaza. It has, but it's taken it 11 months. And its strategy is such that Hamas keeps rearing its ugly head over and over again. And because trucks and trucks and trucks and trucks of humanitarian aid have poured in, the population is not incentivized to end this war like they should be. They're not incentivized to hand over the hostages like they should be. Remember, the hostages are hidden in plain sight among the civilian population. It's one of the reasons Israel, even if they know where they are, has a huge, difficult time to get to them, because they're in densely populated civilian areas. But if the Gazans were starving right now, and Israel said, you want the food? Hand over the civilians. That's a trade. That's the way to get the civilians out without negotiating with Hamas for a ceasefire. Since when has an army fed its enemy while waging war against it? Provided it with internet connection, water, and electricity while fighting it? What is going on in Gaza is an abomination. It is altruism at work, and the result of altruism would be dead hostages, dead Israeli soldiers, and no victory. And no victory. Which means who knows how many dead in the future as a consequence of Hamas remaining in power. And the same is going on with Hezbollah. There's no question about that. Israelis are dying because they're being overly careful. Colleen asks, is there any proof that any of the hostages are still alive? There's not much. Speculation in Israel is right now that about 50% of the hostages are still alive, but that the rest are dead. So they still think 50% are alive. They know for sure some are dead, but they don't know everybody who's dead, and they're just not sure about those who are alive. I mean, at this point, we don't even know if the leader of Hamas, Sinwar, is alive or not. So there's a big question mark about whether he is alive or whether he died in an Israeli bombing a few weeks back. So a lot of unknowns, and part of that reason for that is that in spite of fighting a war in Gaza for 11 months, Israel does not hold territory. It goes in, attacks, and leaves. Goes in, attacks, leaves. Bombs from the air, but has no ground troops to be able to verify who died and what happened. So a very, very, very strange way of fighting a war. And I fear that they're going to do the same thing in southern Lebanon. I have advocated from the beginning a full-on invasion of southern Lebanon, an occupation of that territory through the Litani, at least for a while every last piece of Hezbollah infrastructure dismantled, while every last Hezbollah fighter in the region is killed. Israel needs to occupy that territory and then negotiate a deal with the state of Lebanon, with the Lebanese military, not the UN, but the Lebanese military, to occupy that region, and that make it clear to the Lebanese military that any sign of Hezbollah re-entering the south of Lebanon will mean another Israeli invasion. Although I'm not sure Israel has the. I don't know that anybody would believe Israel saying that because they've said it so many times in history. But maybe after what they've done the last few weeks, they'll believe them. I don't know. Providing the Christian Sunni Jews in Lebanon with the right incentives to shut down Hezbollah really should be the top priority of the Israelis. Anyway, I mean, this stash of emails that Reuters is reporting is full of the direct evidence of how the Biden administration, people within the Biden administration, advocated for and did try to hamper Israel, try to hold it back, try to cause it to slow down, and used the threat of not getting weapons in time and so on in order to force the Israelis to play by the Biden rules. Now, it is true that Israel does not have that many troops. The Israeli army is fairly small, and has become small over the last few years. But its advantages are such that I don't think you need a massive army in order to do it. Now, maybe that is what's delaying action in Iran, is that they need to free up resources from what they're doing in Lebanon before they take on the Iranians, and that's possible. It's possible that the incursion into South Lebanon is limited because they have a limited number of troops. I suspect that the incursion into Lebanon is limited because of the Biden administration's pressure, and because of pressure within Israel, and because of just a fear of not knowing what to do with Lebanon because of what happened in the previous time that Israel entered Lebanon. So past failures, instead of being sources of error correction, of figuring out how to do it right the next time, are reasons to fear doing anything. And look, Israel has one of the problems is that Israel has too few soldiers to lose any, and yet it's taking casualties. And it's taking casualties primarily because it won't just carpet bomb the place. It's already evacuated the civilian population out of the villages. Any house that's suspect, just destroy. Don't send in troops who could be ambushed. Now, again, maybe I'm being too simplistic here. Again, I don't have all the operational information, but it just seems like there's way too much consideration for, quote, humanitarian problems. Finally, Israel is doing everything it can to block any transit of weapons from Iran into Lebanon. They basically told the Beirut airport not to allow any Iranian planes to land in Beirut, or they will be shot or they will be destroyed on the ground, and the airport will take damage. Now, they did allow, I think, the foreign minister of Iran to land yesterday, and Israel didn't do anything. That's some kind of stupid diplomatic courtesy. Israel should have knocked that airplane out of the sky. That would have been not a bad thing to do. And then Israel has also destroyed tunnels, 3.5-kilometer tunnel between Syria and Lebanon that was used to bring in weapon systems from Syria, which gets it from Iran into Lebanon. That tunnel supposedly has been destroyed by the Israelis. They blocked many of the border crossings to make it impossible or make it very, very difficult for Hezbollah to get reinforcements into Lebanon. That is reinforced missiles, reinforced troops, reinforced weapon systems. Israel is systematically destroying the weapons that Hezbollah has in a unbelievably effective and efficient manner. So it is quite amazing how well it is doing it. All right, let's move on to other topics. So that is the Middle East. I'm sure you'll have some. If you have any questions about that, feel free to use the Super Chat to do it. By the way, just for those of you who came in late, I think Ryan announced that today is $1 Sticker Friday. So the idea is for everybody to do a $1 sticker and in support of the show. So feel free to do that. We've already got stickers from Dee and Mary Aline, thank you, and Stephen, and Connor, and Mike, and Ryan did another one, and Mary, and Ruben, and David Arsenault. This is already in the $1 Sticker Friday has already inspired a lot of people, and that is great. Thank you. Thank you, Ryan, for inspiring them. Connor and Mike Dial, and yeah, I think I said all those. And let's see, RDF, yeah, we did. I'm caught up, I think. Okay, so please keep it coming. It's great. Again, I really appreciate anybody who provides any kind of support for the Yaron Brook Show. This is a listener-supported show. It doesn't exist without support from you, and I know some of you can afford to support it at $100 a pop, and others of you can't, and dollar sticker Fridays are for those who can't. Mary Aline, Friend Harper, and Nicholas, thank you guys. All right, let's see. FEMA. FEMA is a government entity established in order to deal with natural catastrophes and to bail people out. It started as a project that basically didn't have a lot of money, and it was just going to provide, the worst hit, the poorest people, the people who couldn't buy insurance, so just really, really extreme cases. And it was very small. And as a consequence of it being very small, there was ongoing incentive for people to buy insurance and to really take personal responsibility about where they built their home, in terms of fire zones, flood zones, or hurricane zones, or whatever. And also, as I said, buy insurance. And for, community help, for charity, to help people who got into real trouble because of natural disasters. But during the 1980s, as there were floods in the Midwest and floods here and floods there, it became popular for politicians to fly into a disaster zone, look around, say, God, this is truly horrific. This is horrible, terrible, unthinkable. The federal government needs to do something. I am going to get Congress to pass a special allocation of funds and bail you guys all out. It's terrible. You have to suffer through this. Something needs to be done. And I, the president, President Bush, President Clinton, President Bush again, President Obama, I will do it. Great photo ops, great opportunity to show how caring they are and how willing they are to spend other people's money in assisting. those who are really desperate and devastated by natural disaster. And every presidency, the amount of money allocated to natural disasters grew and grew and grew and grew to the point where it wasn't just to help the very poor, the people who really could not take care of themselves, the people who really got devastated. But now it basically became a program, FEMA did, that it bailed out everybody. Anybody who didn't have insurance got bailed out. Anybody who suffered real losses got bailed out. Where there was an earthquake, where there was a fire, and it used to be big catastrophes. And then the size of the catastrophe kept shrinking. FEMA got involved in smaller and smaller and smaller catastrophes. And every time Congress would pass a bill, $80 billion, I think it was Katrina, was $80 billion. And I mean, the money just flowed. And you know how well it was spent and how well it was allocated to the sufferers. But the point here is that once you do that, you create a massive moral hazard. And that is people stop buying insurance because they figure, why stop buying insurance? My neighbor who didn't have insurance got bailed out by the government. I had to fight with the insurance company to get what I wanted. I should have never bought insurance and just waited to be bailed out by FEMA. So FEMA is indeed, I think, one of the most immoral agencies out there. It creates massive disincentives for people to think about where they're building homes, massive disincentives for people to buy insurance, massive disincentives for people to actually be responsible. It's a welfare program for everybody. Everybody can apply as long as they've been hit by a natural disaster. They've nationalized, federalized emergency services. Well, but welfare, because this is bailout money. Here's money, buy a new home. This is money, not just money, here, feed yourself while, it's really, really, why you lost your job. Here's money to build your new home and everything else. And I've seen some, people putting up stupid stuff on the chat. People in the hurricane zone only got $750 per person, but Israelis, if you look at the total amount of aid the United States provided Israel divided by the population, they got 10 times more. I mean, that's such BS because FEMA's just started. What they gave the people right now is just the beginning. Now, it's also true that the money America gives Israel is of a different kind. It's national security money. It's money we all are paying for our own defense. We're outsourcing it to Israel, which is cheaper for us. Same with Ukraine. But it's also just not true that the Americans are going to get this small number of dollars. FEMA's just getting started. What happens now is Congress will probably get together. They've already allocated $20 billion for natural disaster relief in the funding bill that just passed to avoid a government shutdown recently. They will probably allocate much more of that once the damage in North Carolina is fully assessed. And a huge amount of money is going to flow to FEMA to allocate for all kinds of things. Probably as much, if not more, than what Israel has received over the last year. Now, Republicans are also accusing FEMA of spending its money on migrants instead of on natural disaster relief. That's just technically not true. The migrant money comes from another pool that FEMA has. Why does FEMA have a pool of money for migrants? I don't know. Don't ask me. It's crazy, but this is agency creep. You set up an agency to do one thing. It does it bigger and bigger and bigger, but it also says, wait a minute, but there's things over there that look a little bit like this. Not exactly, but a little bit. Maybe we should do those as well. And maybe we should do those as well. And the mission creep just takes over, and you get an organization that does a million things that Congress never intended it to do when it set it up. But so be it. The pool for the hurricane relief is a different pool. They've only started spending it. Again, Congress is going to allocate more money. The Republicans are just so, I mean, Democrats are the same way. But right now, Republicans just want to find any excuse to highlight what they see as the number one problem in America, and that's immigration. Migrants, they're legal or illegal. That's the number one issue. I mean, Trump has already said he is going to throw out of the country the Haitian migrants in was it Southfield, Ohio, even though they're legal. Also, J.D. Vance is on a tear right now about housing costs going up because of migrants. As if housing prices weren't going up before. But housing prices are going up because of migrants. Not because of shortage of supply, which, by the way, shortage of supply, which is Springfield. Sorry, what did I say? Southfield? Springfield. Not because of a shortage, because of a shortage of supply, which is partially caused by a shortage of workers, which is caused by not enough migrants. We need more migrants to be able to build all the houses that you and the new migrants are going to need. But home prices should not be going up because of an expanding population. Supply should easily match demand. All right, so FEMA, really, it used to be, FEMA used to be the kind of thing that Republicans would constantly criticize. Some Republicans, kind of the free market Republicans, during the 90s and 2000s, they would constantly criticize FEMA. They would explain the moral hazard. They would explain how they've caused distortions and problems. And now it's like they're arguing, Republicans are arguing that Biden is not giving enough money to FEMA, that FEMA is not bailing out enough people. So, I mean, that's the Republican Party. It's basically gives up every time, gave up on Social Security, gave up on Medicaid, gave up on welfare, gives up fighting FEMA. They give up fighting these agencies, these programs, these welfare programs, other programs. They just give it up and they just roll with it. This is how we get the Republican Party to the left of, I think, the Democratic Party 30, 40 years ago. All right, let's see. That is FEMA. So it's kind of sad that there's nobody today talking about FEMA and the evil that it does. All right, quickly, there was a jobs report today, and it was good. It was good. The numbers came in at 264,000, I think, new jobs, which was way above expectations, which suggests that the economy is doing fine. It suggests that we're probably, at least according to the economists, not heading towards a recession. The things are going pretty well. The markets responded by driving interest rates up with the expectation that the Federal Reserve will not lower interest rates as fast as everybody expected because the economy is doing well. The 2-year yield, I see, jumped up today, quite steep rise in the 2-year. The 10-year I saw also went up. This is a good sign that we're probably not heading towards a recession. At least that's, again, what economists are expecting. And that as a consequence, the Federal Reserve is going to keep interest rates where they are longer or decrease them at a slower rate than was expected before. Republicans have already come out and said they don't believe the jobs report. The job numbers are cooked. This is the Biden administration cooking the books before the election. It's a weird way to do it when they just revised the numbers. You remember they revised the numbers down by 800 and something thousand jobs just before the election. So they're not very good at this manipulating the numbers thing. They really need to get better at it. Really, really need to get better at it if they really want to manipulate stuff. But yeah, the real big problem in the U.S. economy right now is, as I talked about yesterday, commercial real estate. Just like in China, commercial real estate is really, really taking a hit, particularly in places like New York City. But Jobs seem to be healthy. Wages seem to be increasing. Inflation is coming down, although food prices, inflation is coming down, and price inflation is coming down. And overall, the economy seems to be doing not great, not good, but okay, tolerable. The rest of the world's economies are doing horrible. So the U.S. looks like brilliant as comparison. But yeah, a tiny piece of good news. Mexico's president. I told you yesterday, Mexico has a new president. Her name, this is the first woman president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum. Claudia is a rabid leftist, a populist leftist. She's from the same political party as the previous president of Mexico, who was really, really bad. She has a big kind of majority in the parliament, so she can basically pass whatever bill she wants. Well, she was inaugurated. There was a ceremony the other day, and she made sure to invite to the ceremony Vladimir Putin, Nicolas Maduro, and the Cuban president, Miguel Diaz-Canel. She also made a point to not invite, the King of Spain, because she is on this campaign to have Spain apologize to Mexico for its colonial imperial past. She is a really woke president, quite a woke president of Mexico. It's also clear that she is not going to go after cartels, that she's going to embrace the previous president of Mexico's strategy of basically leaving the cartels alone and letting them destroy Mexico's countryside. As long as they don't get too active in Mexico City, they will tolerate whatever the cartels do. Not a good sign long-term for Mexico, the direction this is heading. I find it interesting that in spite of the violence, in spite of everything, people still like living in Mexico, but it is surprising to me because Mexico, outside of Mexico City and a few other cities, is basically run by the cartels, not by the state, and it's not pleasant. It's not good. It's not safe. Not safe. Finally, a really interesting article in the Atlantic today, Atlantic magazine. It's called "The Elite College Students Who Can't Read Books," and it tells the story of a professor who teaches literature humanities at Columbia University, which is like a great books prerequisite. It's a required class. It's been around for a long time. And one of the things he has noticed, and other professors at universities have noticed, is the extent to which students have been struggling with reading books. And there's a whole argument. It's their cell phones, it's electronics, it's this and that, and so on. But this professor dug a little deeper into this and started asking the students what the deal is. Why were they struggling? Why was it so hard? What was the issue that they were facing? And basically the students told the professors that the reality is that they've never read a book. That in high schools, particularly public high schools, they're not required to read a book, not even a thin one. They're assigned excerpts from books. They're assigned poetry. They're assigned news articles, even in literature, but not a single book. And it turns out that this is a common phenomenon. That in English class, in high schools, students are not required to read a book. And this is true, it seems, on a national scale. Now, I was, and this, I read this, and it was interesting because I was in Israel. When I was in Israel, I spoke in front of a group of gifted students. These are students with very high intelligence who take these afternoon programs, after school programs, targeted at gifted students. And I came and gave a talk about capitalism, basically. And in the Q&A, I can't remember what the question was, but we got into this discussion. Somebody asked me where I get my information from, and I said, I read books. And one of the things that really surprised me, I guess, because these are gifted students, so I had a certain assumption about them, that they pushed back on the need to read books. It was like, you read books, whole books? Why do you read books? And really it came out that if they're interested in a topic, they'll Google it, they'll read a Wikipedia article. These days they might ask AI, ChatGPT, and that's it. That's enough. And I had to give a whole articulated, 10-minute response on the value of reading a book on a topic, on the value of going in depth and often on a topic, not just reading one, because that is a particular perspective of an author, and there might be another, and you have to fill it in, and you have to. And I'm not talking about novels here, I'm talking about nonfiction. And it was astounding to me because I assumed gifted students read. And it turns out, no, today they don't. And they're not taught to read in a sense of reading a book and the value of reading a book by the English literature professors at school. This is a disaster. I mean, even if it's a simple book, at whatever level you can get kids to read a book, have that experience. It is truly scary. I mean, this professor at Columbia says, 20 years ago, his classes had no problem reading Pride and Prejudice or in a week, or even Crimes and Punishment. Crime and Punishment is not an easy book to read, Dostoevsky. And 20 years ago, they could read it. And that's in a week. And now they can't handle it. A whole book? I can't read. They can't focus. They can't concentrate. They have no skill set. And they have no comprehension. And, the author of this article, which I recommend reading in The Atlantic today, says they've spoken to numerous professors at universities, and this is not an unusual phenomenon. This is indeed common. Students cannot read books. And a big part of that is they've never been expected to read a book. And I'm not talking about the responsibility of parents here, the responsibility of teachers. Teachers, if you teach a high school class, teach a primary school class. Find a book appropriate for primary school kids to read. They should be reading books. And they should view books as resources. Anyway, it's a depressing story. But that is the state of the culture. And what I find interesting here is how they go straight to the high schools and they figure out what the kids are learning in their undergrads is in their high school or in their primary schools is destroying it. So I'm sure distractions have a lot to do with this, cell phones and everything, but we had television. And I read constantly. I was a little bit weird in that respect because my mom used to complain. She used to say, stop reading, go outside and play with other kids. She used to complain that I didn't socialize enough, that I read too much. Usually mothers complain about the opposite. My mother had a complaint about that. And when I was interested in the topic when I was a kid, we had an encyclopedia, and I would open up an encyclopedia and read it, but I would sometimes just open up the encyclopedia at random, at an entry, and read it. And I was already reading nonfiction books in my late teens, full-on nonfiction books. Friend Harper can't read? You got to read, Friend Harper. There's nothing like reading. And listening, I do a lot of listening. It's not the same. Just not the same. Because you don't control the pace. When you read, you control the pace. RDF says, I loved to read when I was a kid. And what happened? You should all be reading now instead of only listening to podcasts. Reading, reading, reading. Ultimate key to the world, as capitalist spy says. All right, on that depressing news, we are going to turn to the Super Chat. And turn to the Super Chat. Let's see, anything else I wanted to remind you guys of? I think that we're done. This we're done. All right. Just a last piece of news. We can't end on such a depressing book. So this data came out, I think this week, that shows that for the first time in a very long time, maybe ever, obesity rates in the United States, the percentage of the population that is obese, is actually going down. Down. It hit like close to 50%, and it's actually going down. And I like this comment that a commentator on Twitter made. He said, organic food, seed oil elimination, or other food cult didn't do this. It was Ozempic and semaglutides. Have you thanked Big Pharma today? I will do it for you. Thank you, Big Pharma. Thank you. So let me add my thank you to Big Pharma. I'm a huge fan of Big Pharma. I know not everybody is, but these drugs are amazing. There's also a lot of literature out now. The Ozempic and these other drugs are not just good for obesity, but they're good for heart disease, for diabetes, for a bunch of other diseases, not just because they cause you to lower weight, but they have other effects that seem to have this super drug effect. So pay attention. These are all drugs developed by Big Pharma. Evil, evil Big Pharma. Well, I mean, a lot of that will go away if Donald Trump is elected and appoints FDR as his healthcare czar. And, you know, nothing FDR would like more than to shut down Big Pharma. I mean, he is a real hater. God. Okay, where are we? By the way, people are apologizing for being off topic. When it comes to Super Chats, there is no topic. You can go anywhere. You can ask anything. You can say anything. And I will read it. All right, we kind of lapsed on the, you know, $1 sticker Fridays. So there's still lots of you who have not done a $1 sticker today. Let me make sure that I've thanked everybody. RYPNOX, thank you for the sticker. And Quint Wickens, RDF again. Carolina, thank you guys. Thank you for the stickers. All right, and keep them coming. Remo got us started today with 60 euros. Thank you, Remo. Thoughts on the economic phenomenon of private equity creating conglomerates? Because one of its virtues in the past was the breaking up of massive conglomerates. Yes, I mean, this is an important point and a great point. And at the end of the day, it really depends on how they do it. What good private equity does is it doesn't create a conglomerate because it doesn't put them all under the same entity. That is, it doesn't put them all into the same ownership structure. Each one is separate. Each one is valued separately. And the management of each is separate. That is, a private equity firm, a good one, does not actually manage the companies it buys. It appoints professional managers to run them. Professional managers that are incentivized with stock or the equivalent in that specific company. So that each company that they are shareholders in, the private equity fund, is run by expert managers incentivized to maximize the value of that particular company. Now, there's no question it is possible that some private equity funds are using the capital that they have in a way that diversifies them and reduces their risk, and they don't appoint the right managers, and they don't incentivize them right, and they themselves get too involved in the management of the companies. All of that is possible, but that is a death sentence for the private equity fund. Their returns will be lower. Now, maybe their returns are lower and the risk profile is lower and investors don't care, but ultimately they will. Ultimately, they'll suffer the same fate as the old conglomerates. But I think that the better private equity funds and the way they have become successful in the past is by not doing that. Indeed, some private equity funds specialize in a particular type of industry, but they don't put all of them under the same organizational chart. They don't put all of them under the same management team. They assign management. And what the private equity fund usually does is it has representatives on the board, but they don't manage the company, the various companies. So hopefully that answers your question, Remo, in terms of how that works. John says, there are so many U.S. states. Do you think, and thanks for the $50, John, do you think they're necessary? What purpose does having so many serve? Yeah, I don't know if we need so many, but it's not clear that there's value to be gained in getting rid of some of them. One of the things that you gain by having so many is that the representative government that you have, senators from each state, represent a somewhat a constituency of some similarity. A senator from Montana. Montana is Montana. It's not California. And they represent the values and the people in Montana, whereas once you get into very large states like California and Texas, you're not really, there's such a diversity there that the senator can't really represent them in any kind of narrow sense. So, I think there's an advantage to having 50 states in terms of representative government at a federal level. But it's not crucial. You could manage with fewer states if you made the Senate less important. Let's see. The advantage of 50 states is there's competition between 50 states, so you can move and they can customize their legislation to the particular needs of the particular people. And again, there's a certain homogeneity of the people in terms of the issues that they deal with because of the geographic similarity in which they live. Doesn't really apply to California, Texas, New York, Florida. So there's certain advantages to it, disadvantages to it. I don't know that there's a right number of states in a federal system. I like the federal system. I like it's federalized. I don't know what the right number of states would be. I don't know how you would get around it. It doesn't seem like it would be that important. The problems that we face now are not structural, are not issues of too many states, too few states. They're philosophical. And if we fix the philosophy, I don't think it matters how many states you have. All right, Remo. starts on chutzpah in Israel. In most countries, they would see it as a vice. They would also say you lack humility, that you're arrogant. What do you think it is about the culture in Israel that they see it as a virtue? So chutzpah is this assertiveness. You say what you think. You don't play games. Somebody asks you something, you don't say, it's interesting. You say, no, I don't like it. It sucks. It makes for very good managers. What is it about Israeli culture that makes it? I've talked about this. Israeli culture maybe coming out of the way biblical studies are done in Israel among Jews. Israeli culture is a culture of disagreement, debate, confrontation, challenges in a kind of a friendly way. You sit around the dining table and you argue. And it's not a culture of consensus building. It's not a culture of agreement. It's not a culture of silence. It's a culture of voicing your opinions, and you expect to, and you're encouraged to, and you're not penalized for it, even if your views are outside of what the family unit thinks. Where does that come from? I think it comes from the yeshiva, the cheder, where they used to study the Talmud, and the rabbis would argue about every comma in the Bible. Every section they would argue, they would debate. The truth is to be discovered through debate. And I think that has a very healthy attitude for Israelis. And of course, a culture with self-esteem. People with self-esteem, which I think many Israelis have because they built something. It's a country that was built out of nothing. Have this sense of confidence and self-esteem that is required to be able to take criticism, to stand up for yourself, to argue and debate. And there's a certain understanding in Israel that there's not a lot of time. Maybe that's part of their being under threat, whether it's under threat by anti-Semites when you're before the state of Israel, a threat in Israel. There's not a lot of time. You got to get stuff done. You got to say what's on your mind. You got to move forward. You got to find the truth. You got to get things done. And you know, Israelis are less concerned with hurting people's emotions. They're less concerned with being diplomatic about stuff. They just have this desire to get stuff done, and I think it's what makes them the startup nation and what makes them so friendly towards entrepreneurs. So chutzpah is a very positive phenomena. I think deeply rooted in kind of Jewish culture, and has been embraced by the secular part of society completely. And Israelis more so than Jews. Israelis really embrace it and run with it. A tzabar, somebody born in Israel, they're called tzabar, and tzabar is the fruit of the, what do you call a tree? Not a tree, the plant. A tzabar is a prickly pear, right? And the whole idea of it is that Israelis are prickly on the outside and sweet on the inside. And that's a tzabar. And that is related to chutzpah as well. No, not the tree of life. Cactus. It's the fruit of a cactus. Jason, greetings from Mexico. Would it not be very simple for the GOP to use Trump to get elected and then just pick one court case, impeach him within a few months, and give us President Vance? Not good for sure, but how about likely? Zero likelihood. No way that will ever happen. Literally zero. The Republican Party is too cowardly, even if they could think of this. But the fact is they're enamored with Trump. And who would vote for this impeachment? Which Republicans? Marjorie Taylor Greene? I mean, it just won't happen. Won't happen. Republicans are enamored, committed to Trump, and enamored and committed by his followers, by his cult appeal. Yeah, don't worry about it. It's never going to happen. Ryan, thanks, Yaron. YBS is my source for news. I appreciate that. Huge responsibility on my shoulders. But somebody told me today they've stopped consuming any other news source except this show. That's a lot of responsibility on me, but I'm trying to live up to it. All right, Andrew, it's not just the left anymore who expresses anti-American foreign policy views. There's conservatives and libertarians who believe America deserves to be knocked down. Can you explain their hostility to this great nation? Yeah, I mean, it's a nation that is, if you think about the conservatives, and you're right, it's a nation that's been governed by liberals. It's a nation that has, I don't know, gay marriage. It's a nation that has embraced, whose universities are dominated by the left. It's a nation that is secular. It has separation of church and state. And by those standards, it's a horrible, horrible nation. And therefore, it's easy for them to be anti-American. It's a nation that respects the individual. And they're collectivists, just like the left is. It's a little bit more complicated for the libertarians. But again, the libertarians always hated America. It goes back to Murray Rothbard. They've been anti-American since. They hate the fact that America is a successful, if you will, state. They blame every problem in the world on America, which is what Murray Rothbard did. And it's among libertarians, this is a common phenomenon and has been for 40, 50 years. So it's not surprising. It's just that there was a period there where maybe you thought it seemed like libertarians were more reasonable. But no, the Rothbardians have come back to prominence they've had from the beginning of the Libertarian Party. That's why I never get involved in libertarian politics, never support the Libertarian Party. They've always been this rotten. Enric, thank you for the sticker. Stephen, thank you. Matthias, thank you. P. Eddie, Linda, Hunter, and Mary Aline, thank you guys for the stickers. We're doing great. All right, Hector, I've been reading a lot about Richard Nixon. How would you evaluate Richard Nixon's presidency and policies in terms of individual rights, personal freedom, and adherence to rational self-interest? I would say F, and F. I would rank him a failure in every single one of those standards. Richard Nixon basically accepted defeat in Vietnam and tail between the legs, exited that war. It was a complete and utter pragmatist. Now, we should have never been in Vietnam, but if you're there already, you might as well win before you leave and not abandon your allies the way Nixon did, very, very similar to the way Biden did in Afghanistan. Richard Nixon appeased the Soviets. Détente was started under Richard Nixon, and the Soviet Union was bailed out with shipments of wheat, to bail them out. Richard Nixon put price controls. Richard Nixon took the United States off the gold standard. I mean, price controls in America, wage controls in America. He took us off the gold standard. Maybe there was no choice at that point, but he didn't consider any alternatives. There were lots of alternatives at the time. Didn't go for them. The only good thing about Nixon is he appealed the draft. If you think about most of the environmental regulations and most of the environmental agencies that exist in the American government today were founded and expanded and flourished under Richard Nixon. So, by every standard of freedom, of liberty, of limited government, Richard Nixon was an unmitigated disaster. He was a pragmatist influenced by very much the kind of cool events of the day, the environmentalism, the hippies of the 60s and 70s, and he completely embraced the environmental message and really established, he created the EPA by executive order and established it, but he wasn't the only one. A number of regulatory and environmental laws passed under his administration. So bad, 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 bad. Somebody says, Jennifer, this storm is reported as worst ever, but a single weather pattern caused a huge flood disaster in Asheville, North Carolina in 1916. Of course, there's a lot more people now that get hurt by same-size storm. Yeah, and there are a lot more people. There's a lot more infrastructure to get damaged. But not that many people, have died in this storm. Fewer people died in this than Katrina or have died in storms in the past. And Alex Epstein has that great graph of number of people who've died from weather-related events, and it's way down from what it was in the past. So we are so much better in dealing with these catastrophes than we have been in the past. This is a bad storm. It's a particularly wet storm, a lot of rain, which was the problem with this storm. But I don't know by what standard it's the worst ever. Certainly it's not the worst ever in terms of the number of people who died. It's not the worst ever in terms of the amount of damage that's been done. It's a bad storm. Bad storms happen. Hurricanes happen. And when they happen at a particular angle, when they cross a particular piece of land, when they pick up a particular quantity of moisture, they can be very devastating. But to attribute this to anything but a bad storm and to make it into something which the environmentalists are trying to do and linking it up to climate change is really ridiculous. Zachary, sorry if off topic. Nothing's off topic on the Yaron Brook Show. Have you heard of Michael Kramer's O-ring theory of economics? I feel like it is one of the most applicable to the past year. No, I haven't. I have no idea what that is. No idea what that is. And I'm skeptical of kind of new theories of economics in that sense, but I'm certainly willing to take a look and see what I can find out of it. So I've copied it over. I'll take a look. I'll try to get an answer to you once I've taken a look. Adam, please comment on Israel's imitation of U.S. and everything, including the world's worst anti-philosophy of education. Back in the 1950s, they were still using the Lukovich curriculum with complete books from 4th grade on. Israel has always been, as is most, I think, of Europe. It mimics the United States. The United States' culture is dominant everywhere in the world. It's symbolically represented by the fact that there's McDonald's and Starbucks and Burger King and pizza, Domino's Pizza everywhere. We were just Barcelona, where the food is fantastic and not that expensive. And there were all the American fast food chains and everything else. Or Italy with Starbucks, where they have phenomenal coffee. But it's deeper than that. It's, of course, morality and politics and education and Dewey's educational system. Now, I don't know to what extent Dewey's educational system has penetrated into Israeli education. It certainly wasn't when I went through the Israeli educational system. And given the number of entrepreneurs and number of people in Israel who are really, really good at math and science, I'm skeptical about how deep Dewey has gotten into the Israeli educational system, even though I completely believe that it's a lot worse than it used to be, because I think that's true everywhere in the world. But Israel does copy the United States, as the rest of the world does. Really everywhere. Everybody wants to be cool like America, rich like America, successful like America. And since they don't understand the cause of America's success, they adapt to superficialities, or in some cases, they adapt to things that are actually holding America back, like its education programs. But I'm curious. I would be curious to go back to my high school and see if even in Israel they don't read books anymore. I don't know. Maybe that is the case, but I just don't know. Clearly in America they don't read books, but I don't know what the situation is in the Israeli educational system. I'm sure it's a lot worse, and I'm sure it's a lot worse because they accept America. Israeli academics often trained in America. They get their PhDs in the U.S. They go to conferences that are dominated by American professors. They write for journals that are Americans. And therefore, they're influenced because they have to get their stuff published. And everything's American. And I think that's true, again, of intellectuals all over the world. They're all heavily influenced by America. One of the things that we export, unfortunately, really well is ideas. And it's a disaster. Jason, got my Mexican permanent residency today. The process was smooth. Should only take an hour once started. But start was delayed 2 days to update the online visa with the president's new colors, name and logo. Well, but you got it, so I'm glad you're there. How is Mexico? I'm kind of curious. Is it because all you read about is the violence and the cartels and the problems and the challenges? But a lot of Americans are moving to Mexico and live in Mexico, so it can be all bad. So I am curious how bad it is from somebody living in Mexico itself. Upton, could you describe the political orientation of Israeli newspapers? Times of Israel seems centrist. Haaretz seems almost anti-Semitic. Yeah, I mean, most of the papers in Israel are left of center, more left of center than the Israeli politics, which is generally Israeli politics is right of center. Dominantly right of center. There's very little left in Israel, and certainly no far left. And yet Haaretz, which is considered the most intellectual of all the papers, just like the New York Times is considered, is far left. Way outside of the Israeli consensus. Way outside of the Israeli mainstream. And yet it's still a dominant paper. There are other papers, Ma'ariv, Yediot Achronot, there's a Jerusalem Post, used to be right of center, maybe more center today. I don't think they're quite as right as they used to be. Ma'ariv and Yediot Achronot are probably also kind of right of center. I'm sure there's some right-wing newspapers. Sheldon Adelson started a newspaper in Israel that was quite right. So for a small country, Israel has quite a few newspapers, quite a few news sources. On TV, there is a TV station, like Fox, news TV station, that is dedicated to the religious right. So, for example, starting Friday afternoon until Saturday evening, they shut down. There's no, you go to the channel and there's no signal. They don't work on the Sabbath. They are to the right of Netanyahu and to the right of the Netanyahu government. They have opinions that are very good, generally, not always. Sometimes they're crazy right-wing collectivists, but they're very good on the war generally, very bad on pretty much everything else, certainly bad on religion. Channel 12 is slightly left of center. Then there's Channel 13. The fact is, I don't know that much about Israeli media, but that is my general assessment. But Haaretz is way out to the left. So Jason says Lake Chapaya is #1 expat location. His father passed away, and he left him a house. He left me a house here. I am here part-time. Residency gives tax advantages if I sell, but may retire, who knows. Leasing the place now. Cool. All right. I'm curious about Carolina, maybe, what life is like in Mexico, given how much we hear about the negatives. Hunter, have you ever heard of Palmer Luckey? Yes, of course. Or his company, Andreal. In my opinion, his company is the future of defense, and he is outspokenly proud about working in the defense sector. Yeah, Palmer is an interesting guy. I mean, he basically developed Oculus, which he then sold. He developed it at the age of 19. He built it in his garage, literally. The things the virtual reality goggles. And then he sold it to Meta, who has turned it into a huge business, for $2.7 billion. He is considered one of the few entrepreneurs in the Valley who is, kind of on the right, whatever that means. He's a supporter of Trump's. And one of the things that differentiates the entrepreneurs who tend to go into defense industry tend to be on the right. So the CEO of Palantir and what's his name? Peter Thiel, who invested in Palantir, and Palmer Luckey is also defense, kind of building a defense technology. These people tend to be on the right, and they're building the future of the defense industry. The future of the defense industry is tech. And it's going to take a while for the Pentagon to get used to that and to figure out how to deal with it. It's not easy. It's a massive cultural change at the Pentagon to shift from F-35s to drones, to lasers, to, away from kind of heavy, big equipment to ultimately robot soldiers and to AI. But that is the future. And Palmer Luckey is really one of the great entrepreneurs out there today. Again, he built this company when he was 19, and not this company, previous company, and sold it for $2.7 billion. He's incredibly successful and, one of the real shining lights in American business. I don't know about his ideas and his politics. I'm skeptical, but as an entrepreneur, he's a giant. There's no question. Michael, I don't think there is any intellectual who is anti-Israel who isn't an anti-Semite deep down. That is quite possible, although I'm not convinced of it. I'm not convinced that's true. It's too simplistic, I think. You can be anti-Israel for a lot of different reasons that have nothing to do with Jews. So while it's likely that many of them are that way, I'm not convinced that it applies to every single one of them. I'll have to think if I can find examples of that. I mean, for one, there are lots of anti-Israel Jews who you can say they're self-helping Jews, they're anti-Semitic, but that's kind of weird for Jews to be anti-Semitic. But there are lots of anti-Israeli Jews. There's some anti-Israeli ultra-Orthodox Jews committed to the Jewish religion. James says, stand with Israel. Thank you, James. Andrew, did you feel like Galt's character was fleshed out when you first read Atlas Shrugged? What about if you read it now? No, but it didn't need to be. That is, Galt's character doesn't need to be fleshed out. He serves a certain purpose in the novel. The novel's heroes are Dagny and Reardon, and to some extent Francisco, but it's really Dagny and Reardon who are in terms of characterization, are the central characters. Galt is driving the plot, but one of the ingenious thing about the novel is that he is driving the plot from the shadows without you really knowing he's driving the plot for most of the book. So, yeah, you don't have the kind of insight into him as you do with Dagny and Reardon, but that never bothered me. That seemed completely right to me because he is setting out the philosophical framework in which Dagny and Reardon need to learn. And, I just found he's such an ingenious plot device. And you don't need to delve into his character for him to serve that plot device. Indeed, if you delved into his character more, it might undermine the plot device. Kim says, here's coffee money. What's your go-to order and from where? Oh, my go-to, well, it depends where I am. My go-to order at Starbucks is drip coffee, grande coffee, black, no sugar, nothing in it. I have no fancy coffee desires. I hate milk in coffee. I hate anything sweet in coffee. At fancy coffee shops, I like the pour over where they do single source, whatever coffee. It's really interesting to taste the different flavors of the different coffees. What else? In Europe, I basically get it depends on the country, double espresso or what they call a long espresso, or an Americano, if they know what that is, which is an espresso plus water. But basically black coffee, that's it. And at home, we basically have an espresso machine. I love these machines, an espresso machine. And I have my pods and my wife has her pods. I like my coffee a lot stronger than she does. So we each have our own kind of coffee. In the past, we had one of those huge machines where it grinds the coffee. You buy coffee beans and it grinds the coffee, and you can set how strong you want it. And I love those, but I like an espresso because it's so simple. It's so easy. And the coffee tastes really good. Really good. So, and you can get different flavors. So, yeah, I mean, not flavors because it's not flavored coffee, but coffee from different places, different strengths with different flavors. So I love an espresso machine. I know the purists who like to do the espresso just right are horrified by the fact that I like Nespresso, but I do. Ryan says, support the show. Every dollar counts. Dollar Sticker Friday is here. Yes, we're on Dollar Sticker Friday. And we actually, to make our goal for the 2-hour show, and I think we'll go 2 hours today, because we started late, we're basically $52 short. So $52 to make our goal for the second hour. If everybody in the watching right now did a $1 challenge, the $1 challenge sticker, we'd get there easily. So it wouldn't, because we got about 150 watching. Hopper Campbell, is Israel organizing to strike Iran hard, or will Bibi go back to being wimpy? I don't know. I don't understand what's taking so long. The plans are being made. They knew this was going to happen. They had the contingencies. The only explanation I can come up with, reasonable explanation, is that they're busy with Lebanon right now. They just don't have the resources to do the kind of bombing campaign they want to do in Iran. I hope that's the reason, and I hope once they have achieved a certain something in Lebanon, they will take on the Iranian full-fledged, but I don't know for sure. Will Bibi cower out of this? I won't be surprised if he does. I hope he doesn't, but I won't be surprised if he does. And remember, there's also a lot of pressure from the Americans, and Bibi tends to succumb to pressure from Americans. All right, Enric, thank you. Let's see, what do we have here? Martin, thank you, and thank you, Duruski. So now we're just $40 short of our goal. Mary Aline, FEMA is not their money to give. It's not their money to give. Absolutely not their money to give away. If I want to help the victims of a hurricane, if I want to help the victims of an earthquake, if I want to help the victims of anything, I am free to do so. It is not the job of government to reallocate my money towards that. They steal my money and they give it to the victims that they see fit to give it to. Wrong. Questions, you can ask questions in the Super Chat. Feel free to ask questions in the Super Chat. Glenn Beck, FEMA prison camps, Tea Party, keep your government hands off of my Medicare. Yeah, I know. This is the quality of the right that we have today. So-called believers in freedom. Justin, gotta run, YBS fans. Thank you for another fantastic show you're on. Keep up the fantastic work. More dollar contributions. More $1 contribution Fridays. We will do more Friday $1 contributions. Ryan will have to remind me to do it on Fridays. Artin, thank you. Monotropic, thank you. Really appreciate the support. The dollars keep trickling in, but we still need $38 to get to our goal. Matthias, about Big Pharma, what about regulatory capture? Oh, there's no question Big Pharma has regulatory capture to some extent. And just like the financial industry has regulatory capture of the finance. But, okay, it's not ideal. Ideal would be a truly free market in which you had no involvement of the government in healthcare, in which pharma was not regulated. And there would be no FDA, and it would be true freedom, true liberty, true choice. That doesn't exist. Now, the fact that there's regulatory capture does not mean Big Pharma is useless, incompetent, and should not be trusted and is evil by some people's account, the most evil industry in the world. Finance is regulatory captured, and yet banks still do a good job in investing and providing you with deposit services and providing you with loans and doing all kinds of things. It's not as good of a job as they could do in a free market, and once in a while they get into big trouble. So Big Pharma could be providing us with better drugs. They could be more focused on prevention than on curing. They could be more integrated into the entire healthcare system in a way that encouraged health and lifespan. But the regulatory capture does not change the fact that they produce massive quantities of life-saving drugs. They enhance the quality and length of our life. I mean, what would people do without the anti-diabetic drugs, without the anti-cancer drugs, without the statins for high cholesterol, which are clearly saving people's lives and extending life and increasing the quality of people's lives. So Big Pharma is amazing. They could be 100 times more amazing if they were completely free. And if you're going to criticize anybody, criticize government involvement in healthcare. Don't criticize pharma. If you regulate pharma, of course you're going to have regulatory capture. And the fault is not pharma. The fault is the regulators, the regulations. Monotropic. And by the way, every time we criticize pharma, we encourage more regulations. Should guidance in how to courteously disagree be consciously incorporated into parenting or teaching? I don't know. Part of the problem is that we fear disagreement so much that we try to make it more courteous. Let's just disagree. Let's just be willing to passionately disagree and not take it so personally and not take it as an assault on us if somebody says they disagree with us, but just take it as a disagreement and something to be worked out. So part of the problem is people object to disagreements and they resent disagreements. What we need to teach people is to have the emotional fortitude to deal with disagreement, whether it's courteous or not. So what I don't like is people weaseling around disagreements and being overly courteous about disagreements and whitewashing disagreements in the name of courtesy. No, let's just say it what it is. Say it like it is. Florida Nick, thanks for the support. Appreciate it. All right, Christian, should the government ban ingredients in food if it is found to cause health problems? No. I mean, what you eat is up to you. Now, if people are committing fraud by saying, this is good for you and it turns out it's bad for you, then you could sue them for fraud. But no, if there's a product that is clearly, objectively causing real harm like pollution does, and it's objectively identifiable, then yeah, you could imagine certain circumstances as certain things that are being banned. I don't know, certain forms of cyanide or whatever. But the reality is, I mean, it would be like banning smoking. I mean, people know smoking is bad for you, but you shouldn't be banned from smoking. You want to, what if the food is tasty and so this is the difference between food and pollution. Pollution is you have no choice about breathing, so you're exposed to it whether you want to or not. Food, you can choose not to eat certain foods. So I don't think I skipped any super chat. We're getting down the line to everybody's super chat, so I didn't skip anybody's. No, the government should not ban ingredients in food if it's found to cause health problems, because what we eat is at our discretion. It's voluntary. It's not like pollution. That is I hedged too much early on in answering the question. Clearly, the answer is no. As long as fraud is not being committed. Carolina, depends on where you live, violence is localized. Yeah, I think that's probably right. Thank you, Carolina. Jesper, what do you think of the Norwegian justice system? Murderers live like they're in 4-star hotels, but few return to crime. Punishment versus rehabilitation. I don't know enough about it, but I'm for punishment. So I'm not for rehabilitation. It's not the job of the justice system. You can do rehabilitation at the side. And, murderers in my system of justice would never return to crime because they would never return. Murderers should be in prison for the rest of their lives, never see the light of day, if free, at least, maybe in the light of day and through the window of their cell. So I believe in at least murderers certainly being treated. You throw away the keys. And I think a lot of violent crimes, we should be a lot tougher on criminals. And a lot fewer people in jail, because a lot of the people who are in jail today are in jail for victimless crimes. But I'm not familiar, but the idea of me paying for a murderer to sit in a 4-star hotel is pretty despicable. Pretty despicable. So I'm for punishment. Frank, on a show about tariffs, they said Biden couldn't reverse Trump's tariffs because of fear that Americans would lose jobs. It was political suicide. Yeah, I mean, but they're crazy. They don't know what they're talking about. Now, it could be that Biden, because he, like so many, doesn't know economics, thought that, but tariffs are what destroy jobs. It just, the jobs that would have been destroyed by lifting the tariffs would have been visible, versus the jobs that are being created would be invisible. Unless you look, you would have to look for them. And they're too cowardly, and they're too stupid, and they're too ignorant or they're too simplistic to go out and explain what is actually going on to the American public and how tariffs destroy jobs and lifting tariffs creates jobs. But whatever the show is, the people there don't know what they're talking about. I also say this, that Biden didn't reverse Trump's tariff because Biden believes in tariffs. It's not that he believes in free trade. He doesn't. I don't know that Biden believes in anything. His people, they should have reversed the tariffs, and many left-of-center economists, good to better left-of-center economists, were advocating for lifting the tariffs. John, is it true that Jews were heavily involved in the American slave trade? I don't know, but the answer is probably, almost certainly no. They were probably involved at some level. Some Jews were financiers in America and in Europe, and they might have financed some of the slave trade. But no, I mean, I don't think I've ever seen any evidence to suggest that they were heavily involved, disproportionately involved in the slave trade. So my answer is, I'm not an expert, but most likely the answer is absolutely not. And, they certainly didn't own the boats. They didn't own the plantations. The only way they could have been involved is through, I think, through providing loans for that. And I doubt that they dominated that. Andrew, Ayn Rand talked of how Shakespeare was a naturalist. His work was before her theory. I disagree that we can't look at works made prior to her theory and categorize them according to aesthetic theory. I mean, I'll look back and see how exactly she categorized Shakespeare. Is he a naturalist, or, does it have naturalistic characteristics? He rejects free will. So if you categorize all art works as free will, not free will, romantic and naturalist, then you can go back and characterize everything. I'm not sure that she characterized them as an arch determinist, which he is, of course, and which the Greeks are as well, to a large extent. But, Leonard doesn't do that in the 8th grade plays. He doesn't call the pre-romantics naturalists. He calls them something else, classicists. And you could write today in the classicist style, and you would be, in this classicist style. But but going backwards, again, you can point out the similarities. You can point out how the things that are the same without full-on calling them naturalists. But again, literature, we actually have a theory. Other art forms, we don't. We don't have a theory. Nobody's done the work Ayn Rand has done on literature to other art forms. She didn't do it, and nobody else has. Daniel, have you ever tried golfing? It's a fusion of a mental and physical challenge, and challenges you to keep your emotion in check and be as objective as possible. I'm sure that's all true. But no, I've never tried golfing, and I never will, partially because I have a bad back, and golfing is terrible for the back. Just ask Tiger Woods. And partially because golfing is an addictive game. Its very essence is to addict you to it. And as a consequence, it consumes massive amounts of time. And I can't see myself devoting that kind of time to it. It's an addictive game. Any game that presents you with a situation where you can play the same course again and convince yourself you could do it better. You can take the shot again and you could do it better. So you have to go back and do it again, and do it again, and do it again, and do it again. And I'm not saying that as a negative, it's just a factual thing. That's why I will never do it. I have no interest in games like that. Bridge is the closest. Bridge is like that because you play a hand, you can play that hand better, you can play it differently, go back to the same hand and try to play it. It's one of those games that gets in your head and you're constantly thinking about how to do it better. And I was addicted to bridge when I played bridge. It was hard to stop, and I dreamt bridge, and it was all-consuming. I think golf would be all-consuming for me. Also, I can see that you have to keep your emotions in check and everything. I don't want to. When I play, I do not want to keep my emotions in check. Those of you who've seen me play poker, I think, know this. I want to be all out there. I want my emotions to be reflected. I love playing, I used to love, I can't play it anymore, racquetball or squash. Why? Because I could take that little ball and crush it with all my emotional effort. And so I don't want a sporting activity or recreational activity that requires me to keep my emotions in check. I want my emotions. I want to let loose. I want to let loose. And I know in golf I would let loose and the ball would go flying in all kinds of directions as a consequence. I want to keep my emotions in check for decisions I have to make, not for games I play. Andrew says, sometimes I like to imagine what architecture would be like in a laissez-faire world. Do you think buildings would be more deeply interwound with natural environment? Yeah, I mean, I think Frank Lloyd Wright did that, and I think that would be the case. But there would also be the natural environment is buildings. That is, if you go to downtown, it's not a natural environment. You would just have more creativity, more interesting things going on, more focus on beauty. Again, Frank Lloyd Wright is, I think, the real example where his buildings are beautiful and functional at the same time. But it really is hard to imagine what it would be fully like when if we really had laissez-faire. Jeremy, thank you for the sticker. Really appreciate that. Thank you, Andrew, for the question. Thank you, Alejandro, for the sticker. I think I'm all caught up on stickers, and I'm all caught up on you guys. And we made our 2-hour goal in 2 hours exactly. And I'm going to call it a show. And I will see you guys. I might do a show tomorrow or on Sunday. We'll see. Maybe tomorrow. I'll let you know later during the weekend. But certainly there will be a show on Monday. I'm interviewing Ilan Journo on Monday. It'll be the anniversary of 10/7 of 7th of October in Israel. And Ilan and I will be talking foreign policy. What happened that day? What should have been the response? Why the response wasn't what it was? What was lacking? What was fundamentally lacking? And what should Israel do today? So Ilan Journo will be on with me on Monday. Join us on that show, and I'll see you guys possibly over the weekend, certainly on Monday. Bye, everybody.